A quiet public library in San Francisco became the final stage of one of the most sophisticated manhunts in digital crime history. In October 2013, FBI agents swarmed the sci-fi section, grabbed an open laptop from a young man's hands, and ended a years-long chase. That man was Ross Ulbricht, allegedly the secret figure behind the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, the operator of Silk Road, a dark web marketplace where heroin, LSD, hacking tools, and forged passports were sold with near total anonymity. Over just 2 years, Silk Road processed hundreds of millions of dollars in illegal trade using Bitcoin and encrypted networks, all while law enforcement scrambled to figure out who was behind the curtain. The arrest of Ulbricht was explosive, but the aftermath was even stranger. Allegations of murder for hire, federal agents caught stealing from the investigation, theories about identity swaps, framing, and secret NSA surveillance, and one question that still divides people to this day. Was Ross Ulbricht truly the mastermind behind it all, or just the most convenient name to pin it on? Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we walk through the rise and fall of the internet's most notorious black market, the key evidence, and what most likely happened. The beginning. Ross Ulbricht was born in Texas in 1984, a bright, principled student drawn to libertarian philosophy. By 2010, frustrated with government overreach and economic systems he saw as coercive, he set out to create a radical solution, an anonymous online marketplace where people could transact freely. He called it Silk Road. In January 2011, Silk Road launched as a hidden Tor service with all transactions in Bitcoin. Ross operated under the alias Dread Pirate Roberts, a name designed to suggest that the identity could be passed between people. He even seeded the market with his own psychedelic mushrooms. A post on a drug forum by the user Altoid mentioned Silk Road and included an email address, rossulbricht@gmail.com. A small mistake, a big clue. Silk Road's quiet start ended in June 2011 when Gawker published a viral article exposing the site. Traffic surged. Politicians took notice. Senator Chuck Schumer called it the most brazen attempt to peddle drugs online and demanded federal action. Multiple agencies formed Operation Marco Polo. Undercover agents made test buys, more than 60 in total, while cyber investigators hunted for the server. But the identity behind DPR remained hidden. Ross brought on a few trusted collaborators, including a key figure, Variety Jones, later revealed as Roger Thomas Clark, who helped shape Silk Road's strategy and security. Clark encouraged Ross to embrace the Dread Pirate Roberts persona fully, to build a myth that would outlive him. Ross managed a small admin team, but made all major decisions. He earned commissions on every transaction, and by late 2012, Silk Road was booming, generating hundreds of millions in illicit trade. Paranoia and violence. As Silk Road grew, so did the pressure. In early 2013, an admin named Curtis Green was arrested. Undercover agents tricked Ross into believing Green had stolen from the site. DPR approved an $80,000 murder for hire, unaware it was a sting. "I'm a little disturbed, but I'm okay," Ross said after being shown staged photos. Later that year, DPR arranged another hit on an extortionist. Again, it was fake. Ross was never charged with murder, but the chats became a central part of the case. By mid-2013, investigators had located Silk Road's server in Iceland. Some questioned whether the FBI used illegal methods, possibly NSA surveillance, but the court ruled their approach lawful. In San Francisco, Ross was under surveillance. Agents knew he carried his laptop everywhere. On October 1st, 2013, undercover agent Jared Den Yegiayan messaged him, posing as a Silk Road mod with a fake issue. Ross logged in. Inside a quiet library, agents staged a fake argument behind him. As Ross turned his head, another agent snatched the laptop. He was arrested while logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts. On the open laptop, agents found chat logs, financial spreadsheets, unencrypted journals, and a folder called Mastermind. Ross had documented Silk Road's birth, user stats, revenue goals, and expansion plans. The Bitcoin wallets on the laptop matched the site's earnings. The evidence was overwhelming and personal. Trial and sentence. In January 2015, Ross stood trial in New York. His defense admitted he created Silk Road, but claimed he handed off control to others. Judge Catherine Forrest rejected that, and the jury took less than 4 hours to convict him on all counts, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. At sentencing, Ross pleaded for mercy. "Please leave a light at the end of the tunnel." Judge Forrest gave him 2 life sentences, plus 40 years without parole. Soon after the trial, 2 federal agents on the Silk Road investigation, Carl Markforce IV and Sean Bridges, were convicted of stealing Bitcoin and tampering with evidence. One had access to DPR's credentials. These revelations sparked new questions about the case's integrity, but Ross's appeals were denied. A presidential pardon. On January 21, 2025, President Donald Trump issued Ross Ulbricht a full pardon, ending over 11 years in federal prison. Photos of Ross walking free made headlines. His release was celebrated by supporters as long overdue, and condemned by others as a dangerous message. Today, Ross is a free man, but his case continues to spark debate. Was he a visionary who pushed too far, or a kingpin cloaked in code? The story of Ross Ulbricht and Silk Road didn't end with a conviction. In some ways, it only began there. From tech forums and libertarian think pieces to federal court documents and Reddit rabbit holes, the case has continued to provoke questions. Could someone else have been Dread Pirate Roberts? Was Ross set up? Did corrupt agents compromise the investigation? And why, out of all darknet operators, did this one man receive 2 life sentences without parole? Number 1. The multiple DPRs theory. This theory doesn't argue Ross was innocent, just that he wasn't the only one. The Dread Pirate Roberts persona, after all, was explicitly designed to be interchangeable. The idea is to make the role itself immortal, one message from the Silk Road forums read. Ulbricht's own defense leaned on this, that he handed off the operation to others and was lured back at the end as the fall guy. A key piece of evidence emerged in 2016. Someone logged into Silk Road's forum using the Dread Pirate Roberts account on November 18, 2013. Nearly 7 weeks after Ross's arrest. The defense flagged this as critical. If Ross was in custody, who made that login? Ulbricht's mother, Lynn Ulbricht, called it a big chunk of ice revealed. Evidence tampering and apparently at least 1 additional DPR. Then there's Roger Thomas Clark, aka Variety Jones, a central figure behind Silk Road. Court documents described him as a mentor who helped lead the site. It was Clark who suggested the DPR alias in the first place and even prodded Ross to greenlight murder plots. Some believe Clark was more than a consigliere, that he may have been the true operator, with Ross as a talented but naive front. And finally, there's this. Mark Carpelli's CEO of Mt. Gox was once a serious suspect. In 2012, DHS agent Jared Den Yegiayan even filed for a warrant based on the belief that Carpelli's was DPR. Carpelli's denied the claim publicly and prosecutors dismissed the connection as irrelevant. But the very fact that investigators considered another suspect at all has fed speculation that Ross wasn't alone. Still, none of these possibilities were allowed to become central at trial, and the login in November 2013, it wasn't brought up before the jury. Number 2. Ross was set up or framed. This theory takes a more radical stance, that Ross didn't just share blame, he may have been intentionally framed. The argument rests on digital forensics. Ulbricht's defense claimed much of the case hinged on unencrypted data found on Ross's laptop, chat logs, spreadsheets, and journal entries conveniently pointing to him as the mastermind. But critics argue digital evidence can be planted or manipulated, especially when 2 federal agents involved in the case, Carl Mark Force 4 and Sean Bridges, were later convicted of stealing Bitcoin and tampering with the investigation. As Lynn Ulbricht put it, it's the nature of digital evidence that it's easily changed, planted, or deleted without a trace. Ross's defense also cited the post-arrest DPR login as proof of evidence manipulation. Why wasn't this shown in court? And if law enforcement had full control of the site by then, why was someone still using the admin login? Another angle is the sting operation itself. In the library, Agent Dare Yegiayan, posing as Citrus, lured Ross to open Silk Road's admin panel at the exact moment agents swooped in. While not illegal, this setup has been called entrapment-like by some of Ross's supporters, who argue the government baited him into making himself guilty, and ignored other suspects who might have had deeper involvement. And then there's the NSA question. Ulbricht's defense challenged the FBI story about how they found Silk Road's hidden server in Iceland. The government claimed they noticed a technical slip, a capture revealing an IP address, but many cybersecurity experts called that explanation implausible, suggesting NSA surveillance may have been involved. If so, any evidence gathered that way might have been unconstitutional. But these claims were speculative, and the court ruled the FBI's methods were valid. Number 3. It was all Ross, but the sentence was politically motivated. This theory doesn't challenge the facts of the case. It accepts that Ross Ulbricht created and ran Silk Road, but it argues the severity of the sentence had more to do with political optics than justice. Ulbricht received 2 life sentences plus 40 years. No parole, not for murder, not for assault, but for running a website. Critics point out that cartel leaders, human traffickers, and darknet successors like Blake Bentel, Silk Road 2.0, and Alphabay's founder received far less, or in Alphabay's case, died in custody before trial. He's being made an example, one Reddit user argued. It's not about what he did, it's about sending a message. Even the prosecution fed this perception. At sentencing, the lead prosecutor said Ulbricht's punishment would deter others from following in his footsteps. Supporters point to Ulbricht's lack of criminal history and his remorseful speech at sentencing. "I wish I could take it back," Ross said. "Please leave me my old age, a light at the end of the tunnel." Judge Catherine Forrest refused. To many, Ross became the symbolic figurehead of the dark web's danger. And as the first to create such a platform at scale, he bore the brunt of the legal system's fear of what might come next. Number 4. Silk Road was a law enforcement trap all along. A fringe theory, but one that appears in conspiratorial corners of Reddit and web sleuths, is that Silk Road itself may have been co-opted, or even seeded, by intelligence agencies to monitor drug networks. It's speculative, of course, but it gained some traction after the revelation about agent corruption, the possible NSA involvement, and the timing of certain arrests and seizures. Some even claim the murder-for-hire stories were fabrications designed to vilify Ross and justify a heavier sentence. In this version, Ross might have been manipulated from the start, a useful pawn in a larger surveillance game. There's no solid evidence for this theory, but as one commenter put it, if the CIA was running a darknet site to watch drug dealers, would they admit it? Even supporters of this theory usually concede that Ross created Silk Road. The real question they raise is, who was really in control by the end? Number 5. Someone else took over Silk Road after Ross slipped up. A theory floated during trial and echoed in post-verdict interviews is that Ross lost control of Silk Road long before the end, not as a planned handoff, but due to being outmaneuvered. Here, the idea is that Ross made operational mistakes, like logging into forums with his real email or confiding in friends, and someone else inside the operation seized control. This could have been Variety Jones, another admin, or even one of the corrupt federal agents. According to this theory, Ross was roped back in to handle a crisis and got caught holding the bag. Ulbricht's attorney, Joshua Dratel, argued this at trial. Ross created Silk Road as a libertarian experiment, but he handed off the reins and was lured back to be the scapegoat. No conclusive logs or messages have ever verified this version, but some argue the behavioral change in DPR, from idealistic founder to someone who casually orders hits, supports the idea of a shifting identity. Each theory has its champions. Some focus on the gaps in the investigation. Others point to Ross's own words and actions. Still others argue about ethics. Should one man pay so steep a price, even if he did everything they say? But in the end, only one explanation fits best with the evidence, the logic, and the timeline. The Ross Ulbricht case has no shortage of complications: alleged multiple identities, corrupt federal agents, evidence gaps, harsh sentencing. But when you lay all of that aside and apply the principle of Occam's razor, which favors the explanation with the fewest assumptions, one version of events stands above the rest. Ross Ulbricht was Dread Pirate Roberts, from start to finish. He created Silk Road. He ran it. He made the key decisions. And in the end, he was caught. Not because of some vast conspiracy, but because of his own mistakes, ambition, and belief that he could outsmart the system he was challenging. The digital evidence doesn't suggest Ross Ulbricht was Dread Pirate Roberts. It confirms it. The laptop Ross had open at the moment of his arrest contained everything. Not encrypted fragments or vague clues, but clear documentation, chat logs, journal entries, admin credentials, server access, and financial spreadsheets mapping out Silk Road revenue and commissions. More damning still was the personal tone in the entries. Ross wrote extensively about Silk Road's founding and purpose, in his own voice. He imagined future expansions like Silk Road Chat and Silk Road Credit Union. He also reflected on his mistakes, once noting that he regretted telling a friend and ex-girlfriend about this site. As Variety Jones later warned him in private, "You are the weak link." That journal wasn't forged. It wasn't planted. No expert has ever credibly suggested it was. In one log entry, Ross wrote, "I was calling the shots, doing the admin duties, running the servers, managing people. It was taking everything I had." In this light, the simplest conclusion is also the most compelling. Ulbricht built Silk Road and operated it throughout its 2.5-year lifespan. Motive. Ideology meets ego. In the early days, Ross was driven by ideology. His libertarian views are well documented. On forums, in interviews, and in personal writings, he expressed a belief that free markets should exist outside government control. But nothing rarely stays pure when millions are involved. By 2012, Ross was making huge profits. At his arrest, the government estimated his Bitcoin holdings at $13 million, and chat logs reveal him fantasizing about becoming a billionaire. In one exchange with Variety Jones, DPR says he wants to one day walk down the street, rich as hell and anonymous. This isn't the vision of someone who handed off control. It's someone actively building an empire, intoxicated by power, wealth, and secrecy. Means and opportunity. Ross had both. A background in science and programming gave him the technical skills to navigate Tor, deploy encrypted communications, and automate Bitcoin laundering. He also had something else: timing. In 2011, few understood Bitcoin. Fewer still understood how to mask activity on the darknet. Ross combined both technologies just early enough to beat law enforcement to the punch. For a while, Silk Road became what one agent called a pioneer model for criminal e-commerce. Ross wasn't some underdog. He was ahead of his time and knew it. The fall, operational errors, and overconfidence. No system is unbreakable. And Silk Road didn't collapse because of state-level espionage or leaked documents. It fell apart because of operational sloppiness and Ross's overconfidence. Let's list just a few key mistakes. In early forum posts advertising Silk Road, Ross used the handle Altoid, which was later linked to his personal Gmail. He kept sensitive files unencrypted on his laptop, which he brought everywhere. He confided in friends about his involvement, including an ex-girlfriend. He personally conducted interviews as DPR, even boasting to Forbes in 2013, "Silk Road has won the state's war on drugs." These are not the actions of someone trying to distance himself from a criminal enterprise. They're the moves of someone who thinks he's untouchable. The post-arrest DPR login. One of the most cited pieces of proof for multiple DPRs is the post-arrest forum login. Someone accessing the DPR account on November 18, 2013, while Ross was in custody. On the surface, it's a red flag. But the simplest explanation is also the most likely. Someone else with access credentials, likely a corrupt agent, logged in after the fact. Remember, both Carl Mark Force 4 and Sean Bridges had admin-level access to Silk Road. One of them, Bridges, was caught deleting messages, moving Bitcoin, and stealing funds. If either had DPR's forum credentials, using them would have been trivial. This doesn't prove Ross wasn't DPR. It proves that his credentials were compromised, something he himself feared. In one chat, Ross wrote that if Silk Road was ever breached, it would be due to someone on the inside. He was right, but that doesn't mean he wasn't the boss. The associates, Clark, Green, and the myth of succession. Roger Thomas Clark, aka Variety Jones, was more than a technical advisor. He shaped the site's tone, its security, and its strategy. He also suggested violence as a solution, and Ross listened. But the communications always showed Ross making the final call. In one exchange, Clark tells Ross to consider killing Curtis Green, an arrested admin. Ross hesitates. Clark replies, "If you're not up for that, I'll need to seriously reconsider our relationship." Ross went through with it, or tried to. He believed Green was dead and paid for the hit, even if it was faked by undercover agents. That power dynamic is key. Clark advised, Ross commanded. The murder for hire allegations, though never charged, were considered credible enough by the judge to factor into sentencing. Even Judge Forrest, in her final remarks, emphasized that Silk Road was a place of laws Ross created. Why the other theories fall short? Let's briefly address the alternatives. He handed it off. There's no log evidence or chat handoff suggesting a full transition of power. Every traceable communication treated Ross as DPR. He was framed. No credible forensic expert has provided evidence of planted data. The files were accessible, consistent, and corroborated by Ross's own writing. The sentence was political. It likely was, but that doesn't undo the facts. It merely questions proportionality, not guilt. NSA hacked the server. Maybe, maybe not. But Ross's identity was already unraveling due to his own digital trail, his Gmail, his forum posts, and his browsing behavior. Others used the DPR account. Probably true, but only after Ross was caught, not before. Course of events, the simple narrative. In 2011, Ross Ulbricht launches Silk Road. Over 2 years, he expands it, recruits help, and manages all major operations. As Silk Road grows, so does law enforcement pressure. Ross becomes increasingly paranoid and violent. In 2013, after months of surveillance and infiltration, the FBI arrests Ross while he's logged in as DPR. His laptop contains everything. At trial, Ross is convicted. Afterward, 2 agents who helped investigate are revealed to be corrupt, but Ross's digital footprint remains intact. Appeals fail. Ross is serving life. Silk Road is gone. Final assessment. Ross Ulbricht was not a pawn. He was not a tragic idealist who drifted into trouble. He was a highly intelligent operator who understood the stakes, saw the profit, and ran one of the boldest criminal platforms of the 21st century. Yes, his sentence was harsh. Yes, the system made an example of him. And yes, there were ethical failures in the investigation. But none of that changes this. Ross Ulbricht created Silk Road. He ran it, and he was caught running it. As U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara said at the time, Silk Road was a very bold idea. It was attractive to some because it was new and provided a sense of anonymity. But ultimately, it was a criminal enterprise, and no one is above the law. That's what most likely happened.